Welcome back to the Real News Network. We're talking about Sri Lanka and its war with the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam. I'm joined by Dr. R. Cheran, who is an assistant professor at the University of Windsor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. Cheran is the former deputy editor of the Saturday Review, which used to come out of Jaffna in the 1980s, and he's also a founding member of the free media movement in Sri Lanka. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you again.
Cheran, in the last segment, we were talking about the international community's lack of understanding of this conflict. And as a result, what it is proposing in terms of a resolution, a solution, a peace proposal, is all unrealistic and cannot be achieved. So let's get a better understanding of what this conflict is all about and what the international community can actually do in order to bring about a peaceful solution to the conflict. And in order to do that, we really have to understand what the two sides want and what is possible.
The international community had two important opportunities to deal with the conflict. The first opportunity was the agreement, the ceasefire agreement between the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam and the government of Sri Lanka. You know, it was an agreement for permanent ceasefire with an elaborate agreement supported by the international community.
Tell us what the international community is for those who might not be following this issue.
It was mediated by the government of Norway and supported by US, India, and then what they call Japan and all the other countries that were interested in seeing the conflict to an end.
And this body was appointed by the United Nations?
No, the United Nations never had any kind of direct intervention in the Sri Lankan conflict. It was actually mediated by Norway, but UN endorsed it, and most of the powerful countries in the world, they endorsed it. So the agreement treated both parties of the conflict as equals. There was parity, and the territory was demarcated as the territory controlled by the LTTE and the territory controlled by the government. Both parties kept on violating the ceasefire agreement. So that was one of the problems. But the other issue is that the agreement provided lots of space to constructively engage with the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam. So Norway and all the other countries, they went to their territory and they met with the leaders, and there was some kind of reciprocal arrangement. And for several years, the process gave way to some kind of an opening up of a very close totalitarian structure of the LTT. And then, international community had a wonderful opportunity to use the chance to partly educate the LTT and also partly get themselves educated on the nuances of the Sri Lankan conflict. So that kind of constructive engagement did not continue, mainly because at some point the United States decided to host a donor conference in the US, but it failed to invite the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam. That was part of the conflict. So that was followed by the subsequent banning of the LTTE as a terrorist organization by the European Union, and then
as well
Canada.
As the CIA.
As well, yes. So what happened was, while there was a ceasefire agreement in place, and while there was negotiations were going on, and the so-called international community turns around and banned one party of the conflict as illegitimate. So that simply closed the avenues for constructive engagement with an organization like LTT. I mean, we also need to understand the nature of the LTT. It was and it's still a very militant organization. Their main focus is military tactics and attacks. So politics perhaps is not clearly an important option for them. Politics may play a second fiddle to the larger objective of military aims. So in order to bring them back to the so-called the process of political discourse, this kind of constructive engagement is necessary. The international community, during that period, they could have achieved a lot more. And also, when the LTTE was demanded that separate state is impossible, so we cannot simply negotiate on that one, come up with an alternative solution. So then LTTE came up with a solution called internal self-governing authority. That, instead of, they use the notion of self-determination in a very creative way of saying, let's demand internal autonomy, internal self-determination for the Tamil people in the northern east, as opposed to separation.
And that would be somewhat like the Aboriginal people,
yes,
in Canada.
In Canada, yeah, perhaps that is the best comparison. And that was also drafted by an international group of constitutional experts, mostly from diaspora and also from others. And they put forward what they call ISGA, and the Sri Lankan government flatly rejected it, saying that is very maximalist. And secondly, after the tsunami, there was a huge opportunity for both parties to work together at a time of great catastrophe. And then there was this, what they call PTOM, the post-tsunami operational mechanism, that was mooted, supported by the international community, where the government of Sri Lanka and the Tigers would take part in the reconstruction on an equal basis. And the government of Sri Lanka did not want to implement that one, partly because the right-wing Sinhala extremist organization like JVP went to the courts, and there was tremendous opposition from the Sri Lankan government side to enter into any kind of deal. So that fell apart.
So that evokes a question. Is there a role for the international community in this conflict? Can they actually put some teeth into some sort of a peace agreement? And even if they did, would that work?
I think there are a couple of options they might want to consider. They should first come out of this myopic way of looking at things like LTTE is the issue. So the Tamil issue is a larger than issue. LTTE is only one tiny aspect of it. B, they should simply demand an immediate ceasefire, and then and expect both parties to come for talks. And C, they can facilitate the talks by arguing, okay, so this is not going to go ahead, but we do not have to talk about a separate state for the Tamils, but we would rather talk about what are the reasonable ways of addressing the issue. And four, this is a kind of a very realistic and it needs to be worked out, that UN they could invite UN to have a referendum in the northern east to ask the Tamil people what sort of whether they would like to succeed or whether they are willing to accept any other form of self-determination. So that is a simple way of knowing what exactly the Tamil people they want. So it won't be easy, but that is the only way that international community can somehow insert themselves constructively in this scenario.
Is there any other body besides the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam who can be a part of these negotiations representing the Tamil people?
Well, that is a very interesting question. So there is a parliamentary group, a Tamil parliamentary group called the Tamil National Alliance. They are sort of pro-LTTE, even though there are a couple of members, they have their own independent views. But the Tamil nationalism, that has been articulated by the LTTE is so powerful and so articulate. So they have been very successful in eliminating the other kinds of opposition in the past. So right now, LTTE is the dominant force, and there are a couple of other Tamil groups and organizations that are working with the government. So, but most importantly, in any kind of negotiations, the Muslims of Sri Lanka needs to be represented. Otherwise, this conflict cannot be addressed in a very holistic manner. So, realistically speaking, it is the LTTE that has been consistently fighting for the separate state. So, it needs to be. You need to talk to your enemy, right? So you don't have to talk to your friends, because your friends are going to be part of it, right? So, in realistically speaking, so any negotiations have to be had with the LTTE.
So, Cheran, in this segment, we talked about what the role of the international community could be. What are the elements that need to be taken into consideration in facilitating another peace agreement in Sri Lanka? In the next segment, let's talk about what you have introduced here. Please join us again for the fourth part of our interview with Dr. R. Cheran.